All right, everyone, welcome. We've got Winston Marshall here today. Great musician, speaker, has a podcast, has an amazing story. Thanks for coming on the show, Winston.
Bill, thank you for having me, and Sean as well. Good to see you both.
Thanks for being here,
All
Winston.
right. So, what's been going on, man? What have you been working on?
Well, it was that trip I saw you on in June in New York at your wonderful event, which really was a sort of everyone who's on Twitter seemed to be there. I was thinking, who was on Twitter when we were there together? It must have been a desert barren land. They had a good fun, and since then, I came back to your wonderful country and did my first bunch of solo shows ever in my life. I did, when I was 13, play my first ever gig. I played the song "Help" at Bible Camp by the Beatles song at the sort of end of week talent thing, and it was so disastrous that I vowed never to perform solo again. And since then, in the 20 years that have more than 20 years that since then, I've always been in bands. I would write songs, but I would always get someone else to sing the songs. And then for whatever reason, for complicated reasons, I'm no longer in the band that I dedicated my adult life to, Mumford and Sons, and was given this opportunity to play some songs solo. So I played some of the songs I wrote for Mumford and Sons, and it was with FAIR. FAIR are Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism, which is a new civil liberties group founded by Brian Bartning in Florida. He's based now. I think he was formerly in New York, and it's hoping to be the civil liberties group. Sorry, when I say hoping, it's already they've done great work in education and in medicine and in the arts, in being the civil liberties group that the other civil liberties group, take the ACLU or the Southern Poverty Law Center, those groups are failing to be, partly because they've been captured by ideologues, and being a civil liberties group that actually doesn't divide more. And anyway, they're really worth checking out. So we did a bunch of shows, and the shows was a mix of music and panel talking and discussing. And actually, we did one in Los Angeles, and it was another kind of amazing group of people turned up, but it turned out into essentially group therapy, because all the people that came were people that had been cancelled from various walks of life and just didn't, just needed people to talk to. This amazing desire for community. And actually Ariel Pink was there and then ended up, discussing what happened to him. He kind of lost it all in music because he was accused of going to the January 6th storming of the Capitol, but he wasn't even there. He was in DC. He went to the preceding Trump rally, and then went to bed. Apparently, he says he got an early night at the hotel. He woke up, a bunch of text messages accusing. He didn't even know about the Capitol Hill storming, and by the end of the weekend, his record label had dropped him, and sort of all sorts of nightmarish accusations launched at him. So anyway, Ariel was there, and there's a few other people, and it seemed it was probably a little bit distant from the intentions of FAIR, but it was lovely. Anyway, so I'm blabbering on.
No, I mean, I think first of all, FAIR is an absolutely epic organization. Yeah, at the last event, multiple advisors and members of FAIR, including Daryl Davis, Coleman Hughes. Bion was actually very helpful in some of the planning for the event. And yeah, I agree. It's filling a gap that is so crucial to fill right now with kind of the failings of a lot of the traditional civil liberties organizations. Is FAIR doing any kind of legal arm, or is it mostly kind of media and culture right now? It's not like it's not pursuing lawsuits kind of in that ACLU tradition, right?
I think where they're focusing, so they do have a legal arm, but it's more specific. So they're firstly, they're focusing on education and trying to, they've done this already in California, where they've created a syllabus that's compliant with the state regulations on school syllabuses, which essentially is not critical race theory. And so more traditional liberal, I guess classical liberal kind of philosophy underneath, basically a normal education. And in medicine, I believe that they have got a legal arm, and they're helping people in that profession who have, for whatever reason, facing legal consequences. And then in the arts, the big thing they did in the arts is there's a documentary filmmaker called Meg Smaker. There's a wonderful 3-hour-long Sam Harris interview on his podcast. You need to listen to it at double speed, which you have to do with all Sam Harris interviews. But he gets into her story, and she had a film at Sundance Film Festival called Jihad Rehab. She's a remarkable woman. She went out to Yemen for 5 years after. She was a firefighter, and then she moved to Yemen.
Listened to that interview. Yeah, it was an amazing story.
Anyway, I won't repeat it now, but certainly worth listening to. And what FAIR did for her is her story, her film, Jihad Rehab, got cancelled from Sundance Film Festival. And Abigail Disney, who I believe was a producer on the film, issued an apology for her involvement. And what FAIR did is that they surrounded Meg by basically a new community of people who in the arts could help her, so that she wasn't completely destroyed. And I think she did a sort of public screening with Barry Weiss moderating a Q&A after. And then she just came to London, actually, and I hosted a Q&A at the screening of her show. And she's just qualified for BAFTA, ability to be nominated for the BAFTAs, which is great. So it's kind of an attempt to help people in the arts. And there's a few people like this who without resources could end up losing everything. It's not to say that they're FAIR are building companies or record labels, whatever, or production companies, but what they're doing is they're trying to build a community so that people who go through these sort of incidences have the support they need so that they can continue with their work in some capacity.
Yeah,
it really seems like a. Yeah, go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, I was just saying it's so important because there's, the people you're talking about, and Winston, you've dealt with this. When the mob comes for you, it's scary. And, when you're a public person, such as yourself, I think you might have a little more experience with listening to the people. But when you're dealing with people that have never experienced this, it's a really, really scary thing. And you don't really know what to do. I always think it's like you have two choices. Either you apologize or you, kind of fight back. And it's a tough call. Like you really don't know what to do when the mob is coming for you. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really worth just thinking about that for a second, because even though likes of yourselves and me now, we follow what's going on in politics and culture, and we see this happening. But actually, unless you experience it, you're really never prepared for how it's going to happen. And reason that it's almost unfathomable, it's impossible to prepare for it, because I actually think sort of quote unquote cancel culture is as old as man, right? I think that it's a very ancient phenomenon. You can go back to Galileo, to Socrates. This has happened before. You have the wrong opinions, and there are consequences for it. But what's unprecedented is now that it can become a news story, so that millions of people are following it, and you're getting attacked by a mob that is, it's hordes of millions. It's not just hundreds who are nearby. No, of course it's not. You're not being burned at the stake so much, but it's an experience that I just don't think anyone can really be ready for. And the way it comes at you from all angles, certainly this was my experience. It wasn't just public scrutiny and strangers. It was people in my life, like family members going like, what's going, you see your family looking worried. You start worrying, like, why are you worried? And people you work with, it just comes from every aspect of your life that come after you, and you're under the public scrutiny at the same time. It's very difficult to deal with that situation.
Yeah, and the resources that FAIR provides to kind of help the certain individuals navigate that, and access resources to help them even use that situation to grow is really fascinating, because there are, with cancel culture, deplatforming, in certain instances there are examples of the Streisand effect, where it can actually propel whoever is being canceled to like a new level of fame. And but that is not something that everyone is capable of achieving, especially if you don't have an existing audience or resources to kind of leverage that event in the right way. So I'm kind of curious, like,
that's a really good observation. And not just resources, like personality, right? And not everyone. So one of the common criticisms you hear of people who don't think cancel culture exists. And by the way, cancel culture isn't a phenomenon just from one side. The right cancel people just as much as the left, right? But one of the common things, and this is a criticism I get, is I get told when I speak publicly now, oh, you've been cancelled. Well, how come you've got this voice? How come you're speaking on national television and stuff? Well, what they forget is I lost my fucking lifetime work, which there's no reason. If I had different opinions, I'd be able to publicly speak my opinions and keep my job. And now I can't, but I have a much bigger platform in terms of speaking on politics and culture than I had beforehand. And that's a sort of irony, is the people who want to shut you up, is that if they want to shut you up, but then they bring attention to you, they actually make your voice louder. But there are plenty of examples of people that, with me, I now have a podcast with Spectators, British political magazine. It's actually the oldest political magazine in the country. And thank you. Yeah, there you go. But there are plenty of examples of people who have lost it all and don't have the personality type to even necessarily become a pundit, which is another sort of thing, that so many cancel people suddenly become sort of political pundits, whatever. And I know I've fallen into that a little bit, but at the same time, it's a door that's open, so you take it. But for example, in the music industry, Pete Parado is the drummer of the Offspring. He was sacked from that band because he didn't take a vaccine, a COVID vaccine, because he had underlying conditions, so he couldn't take it. Then the singer of the Mighty Mighty Bosstones, I think it's them, it's some sort of ska band, similar thing happened. Now they're still making music, I think, in various ways, but they're not sort of on national television, and most of these people, when it happens, they don't have a voice. But another thing to boot is that this phenomenon isn't just happening for people in the public eye, it's happening across so many professions. So most people keep it's not going to become a story, and so
it gets drowned. Yeah, I mean, most people, like all the hundreds, thousands, millions of people who were banned from social media for sharing a link to a COVID study or whatever it is, like they have it's definitely a privileged kind of position in the world of cancel culture to have the opportunity to kind of go viral from it. Like to your point, I would say the vast majority don't have that opportunity, though it can randomly happen depending on the story. So I think Pete is has been recording music with Timcast.
Yeah, I did hear that, actually, that he's playing drums on one of the singles.
Yeah, that was a shock. Yeah, and I think like in the 80s and 90s growing up, the celebrities that got canceled, it was always something like, they cheated on their wife, or they did something, terrible, or whatever the case, and they would get canceled in the press. But I think what's changed today, it's like you get canceled immediately by your peers on social media. You don't even have to be a known person. And and they don't stop with just you. Like they want to, they want to debank you. They want you to lose your job, but they also go after your friends and your family and people have nothing to do with, what you said on social
I
media.
mean,
So yeah,
dude, think of all the rock and roll, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Like, think of all
yeah,
the rock stars that would have been canceled if social media had existed for the past 30 years. I mean,
that's yeah,
because rock and rollers like are, traditionally like, wild, and it's scandalous. And but there wasn't the social media engine to kind of bring attention to probably all the crazy stuff they were doing. So it's kind of funny to think about all of the, rock stars who would have been canceled if it had existed back then.
Well, quite. Although I think there's a little bit of a difference. The modern phenomenon is that people are getting cancelled for things that aren't actually even morally an issue. They're just the wrong opinions, right? So it's one thing. Right. You can make a good point. Like, apparently Led Zeppelin had 13-year-old girlfriends or whatever, and there's a moral question there, at least. Like that is actually something that's, well, I'm not going to judge. Well, actually, I'm happy to judge that that's not okay.
Yeah.
But I don't know whether that's
right.
actually true. But I think so. For example, in my case, I had to quit my band because I tweeted favorably about Andy Ngo's book documenting the behavior of Antifa and BLM riots in 2020. Now, there's nothing morally wrong with that, but that had severe, huge repercussions for me. I was made to apologize by the band. I was put in a position where I could either shut up and kind of go along with that lie, or tell the truth, but I'd have to leave. So those are but then, and again, taking Ariel got cancelled for something he didn't even do. Like, January 6th is such an offensive topic to half of Americans that even not going, but having been in DC was enough for Ariel to lose it all. And that's the difference,
That is a shift. It's like any even peripheral involvement to something that might be touching, like, conservative or libertarian ideas is considered, or even classical liberal ideas, not even, forget about the right, just classical liberal peripheral conversations are going to cause that to come up. But at the same time, and I know, Winston, you are, the opposite of someone who would adopt any kind of like victim mentality around this. And I think that that's kind of a bit of the taboo happening with cancel culture. It's just like, because you're so right. It's existed forever. It's not something like, it is a social problem in terms of sort of the tribalism right now, but at the same time, like, it's always existed. It's not something that we expect to like eliminate or anything.
Yeah, I think
I don't think it can get eliminated. I don't think it's going anywhere. Hope.
I'll play devil's advocate. So like someone like Lex Friedman or Joe Rogan, like their whole ethos is love. Like it's all love. Like you'll hear them say that constantly. It's all love. And I've been trying to like adopt more of that outlook on life where it's like all love, like if there are people in your life that, harm you or whatever, like, talk bad about you or whatever, like those are people who probably you should be hanging out with. But like just adopting the outlook of like looking at it from a very positive view, it's really helped me a lot, like personally. And I think if more people start looking like, hey, how can we work together instead of working against one another? I think that's the best way to really fight the cancel culture tactic. I don't know. That's just my thought.
Yeah. That the best in that sense is that we sort of act that way and show support for people with whom we disagree, who are going through it. And actually, there's one example of this in the UK, which is that there's a football player called Trevor Sinclair who used to play for Queen's Park Rangers and for England. He was a big football player, and he became an England football pundit. And he, when the Queen passed away, he said something that was a pretty, I guess, I can't remember the exact words, but wasn't really in the spirit, was quite critical of her and the monarchy, or at least the monarchy as a colonial force and a racist institution. I can't remember exactly what it was. Now, I happen to disagree with him, but he was suspended from his job for saying that. So in terms of that, now that is cancel culture, right? He's for having the wrong opinions. He has had professional repercussions as a consequence. Now, because I disagree with him, my instinct would be to go like, "You're absolutely wrong." Now, I do think that, but you need to support these people to have the right to do that. And I think the best way to, because it's not, I don't know how much protection you can enforce in this stuff legally. You know, for goodness sakes, in America, you've got the First Amendment. It's in there, and yet this phenomenon still exists because it's social, and these are private companies that sort of have a right. So the best thing we can do as individuals is support people with whom we disagree to have that right to say what they think. I certainly think we have.
Yeah, and certainly not lose livelihoods over it. I think that I think part of the problem that I was getting at is that cancel culture is such a broad phrase that it encompasses too much, because you're clumping everybody together, like yourself, Winston, or Ariel, but you're clumping you together with, like, you know, Me Too and like all of these like actually, you know, potentially unethical problems, which, like, you don't deserve to be in the same bucket. Like somebody who has violated an underage girl and is getting, you know, canceled is not even in the same reality or ballpark as somebody, you know, who, you know, happens to support free speech. But yet we use the same phrase to refer to both of those.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah.
It's worse than that. Like in the cultural discourse or in the political discourse, someone like Elon Musk is told, you know, we constantly hear he's apparently some sort of fascist Nazi. But then what was the name of that rapper who killed, was it Little Baby or something? In Florida, I think, and he I think he killed someone. I don't want to get this wrong. I think he killed someone and it didn't get cancelled for that. He's fine. I think, and then he ended up getting cancelled for some total peccadillo. It was like, what the fuck? Like the sort of standards is so askew and sort of mixed up, and
yeah, and I think that's a good point, Bill. That, you know, we should differentiate cancel culture from like
it's almost like
wrong
we need new words. Like,
yeah, exactly.
We need a new phrase. We need to, you know, be more specific in our language so that we're not conjoining those two, you know, completely. Like, it's like ethical cancel culture versus unethical cancel culture, quite frankly, because it's like, we would all agree that, like, there should be consequences publicly to call out people who do truly unethical things. But when it is a perfectly ethical, you know, use of your civil liberties, it's a different phenomena.
Yeah,
there's another phenomenon:
crimes versus actual crimes. Sorry, Winston.
That I was at a dinner party about a year ago and sat next to an American lady, and somehow the dinner party got to the topic of cancel culture, which is now a popular topic at dinner parties. And she goes, as soon as the topic came out, as soon as she heard those words, she went, "Oh, cancel culture is the worst. I just got cancelled myself." And I was on the other side of me was an Italian director lady, very, very sweet, and she's from Italy. She didn't know what cancel culture was. She goes, "Well, sorry, what is cancel culture? I don't know." And she the American goes, "Well, me and my sister, we disagree massively over our father's will, and we can't agree, and so she stopped talking to me. That's cancel culture." And I was like, "Whoa." That is not cancel culture. That's just family, man.
Yeah.
It's become such an abused term that everyone thinks, "Oh, I've been ghosted. I've been cancelled." No, that's not what cancel culture is.
Yeah.
It's like
there need some standards here.
Yeah, it's like when activists are actually trying to cancel somebody based on false pretenses or thought crimes. Yeah, I agree. Like the thought crimes versus actual crimes. Yeah, actual crimes, people should be, you know, sent to jail or, you know, whatever. But it's the thought crime stuff that's insane these days. So
In the last few minutes, I would love to talk about something you mentioned in the beginning, Winston. Kind of the therapeutic aspect of these events and just kind of working through the hard conversations. I mean, I've said for a while that I sort of feel like Minds is a bit of a therapy app. And therapy apps are kind of blowing up right now. And I'm very interested in bringing therapy more into our app because, and I think that even just talking about therapy, just saying the word sort of turns on a light bulb in people's brains where suddenly, like, if you look at someone like Kanye or, who even like an actual Nazi, and you look at that actual Nazi through the lens of mental health and say, okay, well, this person is not like, they don't deserve to uh, be banished from society. They clearly have some sort of mental issue going on. I mean, they would disagree, but I think that there's a lens of compassion that comes along with mental health in context of controversial ideas that is extremely helpful to making people who would otherwise, call them a bigot or just say they should be banned for hate speech. But it brings in this lens of compassion, which I think is super useful.
Well, you can go further than that in the compassion. I mean, it's not just compassion for people with mental health issues. And the great example of this is Daryl Davis, who came up earlier in this conversation. Now, Daryl was with me and did a couple of shows that I did on the last US run. And he's what kind of piano? What's not honky tonk piano, but I've forgotten the
Blues.
Yeah, blues pianist and boogie woogie pianist, right? And
Boogie woogie, yeah.
And he played with Chuck Berry, Jerry Lee Lewis. This guy is rhythm and blues, rock and roll, music royalty. He's played with everyone under the sun, and as well as music, he's also done this de-radicalization stuff where he met with former KKK and white supremacists in the States and tried to basically bring them away, and not necessarily people with mental health issues, but he came from a point of compassion where he obviously disagreed with what their worldview was, but put himself. He's a black guy, by the way, worth noting. In this very difficult situation, he put himself forward because he realized that they were humans, and as we're taught by Christ. I actually don't know if he's Christian, but we're all fallen and fallible, and he made the attempt to go across the divide towards them, not because they're mentally unwell, but because they're humans, and he recognized in himself, I guess, that he too is fallible in different ways. So I think it's very trying. When Kanye says what he said recently in the anti-Semitic stuff, it's like, it makes it very difficult. But in some way, like Kanye having mental health issues or alleged mental health issues makes it easier to be compassionate. But can we be compassionate for the people who don't have mental health issues? That's much harder.
Well, and I think that's fascinating. It's kind of like, where is the line? So if you have somebody who is, captured by ideology in a very extreme way, and that's resulting in all sorts of bizarre behavior, like, there are many, like, first of all, is that a mental health issue to be in the KKK? I don't know the answer to that. Maybe the answer may be no. The answer may be yes. But because certainly they would not say that they have a mental health issue, but I don't know. It's hard to say. Is somebody who is brainwashed, is that a mental health? It's kind of a deeper question. But yeah, it's certainly complex. And Daryl is. You should play music with him. Did you play at any of the events?
We did. I was
awesome.
Completely inadequate to. He asked me to play some electric guitar, and I just completely flopped. It was humiliating for me. But he's
I don't believe you.
I don't believe that.
Yeah, no, I mean, making those changes in the in the blues shredding is I mean, yeah, he's got his he's got his changes. I actually got to go to his house one time about 6 months ago. Me and Ben Stewart, when we filmed an interview in his house, and God, his living room is so cool. He's just got like, it's just full of pianos and like all of these framed photographs all over the wall of just like his whole life. It's very surreal, kind of badass 80s vibe in there. But okay, cool. Well,
Well, before we let you go, Winston, I wanted to just pick your brain quick on your collab with Ariel with Rudolph's laptop. So like the Hunter Biden laptop story, obviously a huge story, something that was played down, something that was called a conspiracy theory, something that it was very divisive. A lot of people thought one way or the other, and you guys decided to do a Christmas song on it, which I thought was amazing. So yeah, I was wondering like how that came together and like what the process was.
So obviously, as you suggest, most of the mainstream media ignored that story, rather embarrassing for them. Although I'm proud to say that I didn't on my podcast, and there's a couple of news outlets that didn't. Actually, I had Sohrab Ahmari on, who was one of the editors at the New York Post in September. Was it October?
Great interview.
Where when the New York Post went live with that story, but it was then censored by big tech. Anyway, various people ignoring the story and the significance of it. But when Ariel came to London and we did an event together at Unheard in Westminster, and we made some music together, and we got in the studio. And it was when the Twitter files were coming out. So we would be up all night scrolling through Twitter files, listening on the Twitter spaces as various people were, Elon calling in from his private jet. We were sort of following it. And it was just also funny, although it's weird. It was not funny, more exciting. You really feel like you're a part of it. You feel like you're invited into the story, into the room with them. And anyway, but there's also frustrations because how it's still being ignored, and it's particularly frustrating in being in the creative industries when you feel like everyone you're surrounded with is ignoring what is such a huge story. Not only that the then Vice President Joe Biden had possible links, not possible links, he was linked to the Burisma energy company in Ukraine, with emails specifically from Hunter saying to Hunter saying thanks for the opportunity to meet your father, to energy company in China saying where they have 10% for the big guy in the deal. Now, to be clear, we don't know who the big guy is, but it's almost certainly Biden, and Biden hasn't denied that it's him. Although Biden has denied ever meeting anyone for Burisma, but. And then there's also all the like crack cocaine. He seems to like filming himself doing crack cocaine and sort of various illicit libidinous behavior. But so anyway, we were sort of doing this, and we wanted to write a Christmas song, and it was just up. So we thought, fuck it, let's just do a Christmas song about Hunter, and we made it about Rudolph. It was just totally silly. It was a joke, We're just trying to amuse ourselves, and then this guy called King Con 2K11 did this really cool AI art video for it. And we put it out on Christmas Day. Again, most Christmas songs come out probably end of November. You do a build up. We thought, no, we'll put it out on Christmas Day. And then Fox News picked up on it, and Tulsi Gabbard had us on her show, and we spoke about it a little bit. And then after that point, then the music press picked up on it. And this was where it was funny, because you can see how ideologically captured the music press are. And this is sort of what you're up against if you're in the music industry. Consequence of Sound saying not only that, various lies, right? Repeating the calumnious accusation that Ariel was at Capitol Hill, which he was not. It called him an insurrectionist. He was not even there. But also even saying that the laptop story wasn't real. Like even the New York Times, the long lost New York Times, concede that the Hunter laptop story, it was Hunter's laptop. And of course, we haven't even touched on how scandalous it is that it's been the DNC and government and FBI that are the ones colluding with big tech to censor. But that, I mean, that's the real story.
And I should make sure we follow up on this. So Ken Hayes, who co-produced the Minds Fest in New York City, so he also is the founder of Gathering of the Vibes Music Festival. I don't know if you ever have heard of that. It was a big rock festival in Connecticut that isn't happening anymore. Anyway, he has a good relation. He knows the people at Consequence of Sound quite well. I would love to like maybe make that connection so that we can get a correction or something, because that seems like completely unacceptable.
Well, yeah, it's certainly. I have a feeling that they might have changed Ariel's thing from Insurrectionist, but you know, it's not.
No, but like
it's always after the fact.
Yahoo News, and I'm not. This Billboard piece you've got up, for example, it says conservative duo. I'm not conservative. I've got nothing against conservatives, but I'm not a conservative. At least I don't think I am.
It's the weaponization of language. It's pure weaponization, using these terms, far right, just even conservative, mislabeling people, putting people into buckets. They're such lazy tactics.
Yeah, also, look, you see, this headline you got up here says the conservative duo joined Tucker Carlson tonight. Well, we joined Tulsi Gabbard, who was filling in for Tucker Carlson. So there's another way to spin
that out. Yeah.
Which is the liberal duo, Tulsi Gabbard, former Democratic presidential nominee. Now that the story is completely different there, but that's actually true.
Yeah, that's why I pulled that one up. I knew you'd love this headline. This is
just to comment. Like I have to say, the sort of psychedelic, playful vibe of the track is really powerful. I have to say, I really like your guys' sound. It's very compelling. So I hope you guys will keep making music together.
Yeah, and the AI art really brought me back to like Genesis or Peter Gabriel, with like the claymation, seeing like Ronald Reagan's face melting and stuff, like it was, that was a really cool add-on. I really like that.
He's a talented guy, this guy, King Connor 2K11 or King Con.
I have King Con 2K11. Yep.
Yeah, he's really talented English guy.
Yeah. No, that was awesome. Yeah, and I did, I heard your interview with Sohrab, and it was fantastic. And I'm glad you guys got into the big tech side. And he was talking about how the China story never really flew, which was interesting. Like everyone was focused on the Hunter Biden laptop, the original piece, but not the Chinese connection. But yeah, no, it's like a huge
I think
story.
That is the story. I don't the idea of Hunter with or doing all the drugs and the prostitution, it doesn't look great, but ultimately that could have been spun in Joe Biden's favor. Look, I've got this son, he does all this suffering, and most families can relate to that. Like addiction's a pretty common phenomenon, and maybe some people could ridicule him, but most people would feel compassionate for him. That's not really the story. The story is his business links at a time when he was vice president. Now, whether that's technically, whether that's actual evidence of corruption, we don't technically have it, but it needs to be looked into. And
we investigate. Like, sorry, go ahead, finish.
Well, the other key thing is I saw one poll where 4 or 5% of voters would have voted differently had they known about that story, and that still doesn't mean that the election result would have been different, but it certainly could have been different.
Mm-hmm. And this is just one facet of what the Twitter files are showing us. I mean, so the Hunter Biden story is huge with the laptop. Mm-hmm. But again, that is a small slice of the influence that the government was trying to drive through Twitter. Because you have all the COVID censorship, you have all of the other types of politically motivated takedown requests, and all of that was clearly, and it's social engineering is what it is. Like the news feeds are manufacturing kind of what people think about things, and the absence of certain information absolutely influences it. So I certainly hope we're going to see hearings about this. I think the evidence seems so overwhelming that hearings are necessary. So, fingers crossed.
If is it the House or the Senate that's changing in January? Oh, now is it? Which one of them flipped?
Great question. We should know this. I should know.
Well, I think that now that it has flipped, we should see some hearings. Or I'd like to. Anyway, I'm not totally sure how the American system works, but I'd have hoped so. And I've got a question for you because it's relevant to all this. Now, how does Musk cleaning up Twitter affect minds?
Yeah, good question. So he's cleaning up aspects of it. Like the Twitter files are an unprecedented, incredible act of transparency. However, in terms of free speech, I think that he's making leaps and bounds, but he hasn't actually changed the policy much. And he seems to be doing things rather arbitrarily. And he's also seemingly arbitrarily banning certain people still and keeping certain people off the platform who really shouldn't be off. So it's like he's making a lot of progress, but in terms of the policy itself, it still needs a lot of work. The code is, and the algorithms are still all the same really and haven't been published, which he said he was going to do. So I think of it as a net win for humanity. Minds participates on Twitter. I think that it's waking more people up to the value of internet freedom in general, which is very good for our entire sort of slice of the industry. And so I'm not going to get into this sort of like, I think of it more as collaborative. Like I would love to collaborate with Twitter and create hooks between Twitter and Minds so that we can work together. And I have total, I'm an Elon fan. I want them to succeed, but I'm also we're going to hold them accountable and not just kind of be lapdogs for Elon with everything he does. Cause he has made numerous mistakes so far. I mean, he threatened to ban every link to, anyone who posted links to Instagram or Mastodon or Nostr, which is one of the protocols that we're using. Like that was just sort of like an out of nowhere. Did you miss that?
What's the story? When did that happen?
Twitter's support rolled out an actual like new Twitter policy that was saying that if you you could no longer promote your Instagram or your Linktree or your there's a whole list of social networks that were not going to be allowed to get promoted. And then there was such backlash that they rolled it back within like 48 hours. And then, I think like, I don't think Kanye should have been banned personally. I mean, he didn't do anything illegal. So, there's a handful of things like that I think are questionable, but at the same time, there's so much good happening that it's a mixed bag.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's definitely a net positive. I think, him taking it at such a huge cost and risk is awesome for everyone. But yeah, I think there's things that we could offer, like the policies, path to redemption. There are accounts that have been banned. There really isn't like a really good process for banned accounts to file appeals. And then also monetizing the users, like giving the users on the platform a way to earn some money. I think historically big tech platforms have been terrible with that. We really focus hard on that with Minds because people are spending a lot of the time of their day on the platform. You want to make it worth their while. So
yeah, and the thing with social media is that it's not a zero-sum game. So it's very easy to say, oh, Minds versus Twitter or Twitter versus YouTube or whatever it is. But the reality is the world is so big and, people love social media so much. It's like we all have, 5 or 10 apps on our phones that we're popping around, and that's not going to change as long as each network is providing you some unique value. I think for us, our unique value, like even though we have a smaller user base, millions as opposed to tens or hundreds of millions, it's all about, can you actually reach people? So like for smaller to mid-sized creators, Minds is actually better than Twitter or Facebook because we have tools so that people can actually get engagement. There's so many people who post for years on Twitter and they have like 200 followers and they never grow. But like we have so many great artists and kind of more mid-sized creators who they prefer Minds because it's much more of a tight community that you can actually access. So I don't know. I don't need to go into a whole list of things, but I think that people have tons of appetite for apps that bring them value. And you also don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. As we know with social media, you never know what's going to happen at one network or another. And you don't want to the offensive thing about a lot of the deplatforming is that people lose these audiences that they've been fostering for like a decade. You spend 10 years building up a YouTube channel and then suddenly, your 500,000 followers are gone. I mean, that's like devastating to a career. So you want to diversify and not to get too tech, but I mentioned Nostr, which is this decentralized protocol that Minds is integrated with. Where we think things are heading is that actually your followers and your content are not going to be something that are locked into Minds. So right now, actually, on Minds, you can log in with your private key that you can get on Minds into other apps that work on the Nostr protocol, and your followers and your content actually come with you. So you can, like, we believe that the followers, content, data should be a portable asset that the creator owns, as opposed to something that's locked into Facebook or Twitter or YouTube, because that is what we all work so hard to build up over our lives is our network. That shouldn't be something that some company has the ability to just take away from you. So that's the type of thing that we would love to work with Twitter on, is having them integrate with Nostr so that the creator is really coming first at the end of the day, and they have sovereignty over their digital assets. So
long story short.
But what are your, let's close on what are your thoughts of the transformation of Twitter, Winston?
Well, I might go back one moment and make a sort of defense of Musk without being a sort of Musk ideologue, because I do think that I see him as a sort of benign dictator, but he is fallible and has made errors, and no doubt will make more again. But firstly, I do think Kanye should have been banned. He's tweeted, when I wake up, I'm going to go DEFCON 3 on all Jewish people. And I'm sorry, that is, if that's not an incitement to violence, it's pretty damn close. And so I don't have a problem with him.
I don't think that's what he was banned for.
Initially, that's what he was, but Elon let him back on after that.
He got a suspension for that, which, again, suspensions I'm perfectly fine with. But he was actually banned for a piece of art, which was sort of this hybridization of it actually wasn't a swastika, but it was a Star of David with a swastika kind of inside it, but it actually wasn't a swastika. It was the logo of this like UFO group called the Raelians, which it was actually a tilted swastika, which is more along the lines of like the Indian or the Hindu symbol, which Kanye actually thought he was posting it in sort of, because we spoke to Shane Cashman about this, who interviewed Kanye, and so Kanye thought that he was posting sort of this like coming together of, Jewish people and Nazis. And it was sort of like this weird idea of a symbol of love. Anyway, Musk and all the Twitter people thought that, so they banned him for posting a swastika, which I don't think that people should be banned from social media for posting swastikas. I agree with you on the DEF CON thing. That is arguably an incitement. But again, I don't necessarily like, we have to ask ourselves, is there a path to redemption? Should there be a path to redemption on social media, even for people who have violated terms? Like maybe there should be an extended period of suspension, and there should be some sort of like rehab that has to occur. But the idea of like permanently banning Kanye from social media, I just don't think is a viable long-term type solution.
Yeah, it's like the Daryl Davis approach where, Nazis, you don't want them on your platform, or white supremacists or whatever, but instead of permanently banning them out of society, he's actually going and talking to them and, de-radicalizing them, helping them out of that. I mean, I think path to redemptions are just important, and permabans, they really all they do is just create this the 4chans and the 8chans of the world where people then that's their only outlet, and then they get more extreme. So yeah, I'm just against permabans.
The thing with sorry, just one quick note is that it just feels like it was a very manual process of how the Kanye thing went down. It doesn't, because Twitter hasn't actually changed their policies. It very much feels like Elon was just sitting there and kind of making it up as he went, as opposed to having it go through actually a new process that is more aligned with free speech. I'm not saying Elon doesn't have the right to do what he did. He certainly does have the right. It's his company. He can do whatever he wants. But this sort of cat and mouse game with, Kanye or Alex Jones, who he won't let on, which I'm not defending Alex Jones, but it's just like Alex Jones was banned from Twitter for a video confrontation with CNN correspondent or MSNBC, Oliver Darcy. I think it's CNN, which has nothing to do with actually the Sandy Hook stuff, which is what Elon said was the reason that he couldn't come back on. So there's just like a little bit of obscurity. And
look, as I said, he's going to make mistakes, but I think that one thing he's shown is that when you take the earlier example of linking to other social media platforms, which he initially put in and then after the pushback retracted, he's shown that he's not completely, dictatorial. He does listen. And so even if we don't agree on all specific things, they're clearly working it out, and they're clearly working out what's right. And they're doing that pretty out in the open, or at least seemingly out in the open. And so with that in mind, given how recently he took over, I think it's actually pretty remarkable how quickly, because also on the plus side, he's got rid of a ton of child porn on there, and I think regular porn as well. I'm not sure. And there's a big cleanup that he's done that's really commendable. So
absolutely do not get me wrong. I am personally a huge Elon fan. I'm rooting for him. I believe Twitter is drastically better than it was, and the real-time decision making that he's doing is refreshing. The point you made about feeling involved in the process, it's all 100% true, and we're on team Elon. Mistake, but that and we're gonna speak our minds about issues that we see, and it appears that he's going to respond to the community when he sees pushback. But we still need to give the pushback to push it to where we want to go. So yes, it's all love Elon Musk. He's an absolute battle. The fact that one of the richest people in the world just like post memes and is like having so much fun with it is, I think it's a game changer for humanity, quite frankly. Like, because in the past, it's always been like you sort of had the elite billionaire class who were so sterile and cold. And now it's sort of like, oh, well, wait a second, like we're the same. And that never existed before. So,
and I think what he's doing, what he's doing is he's giving a path to the other, like the Zuckerbergs of the world, to be like, hey, you can be a CEO like this. You can pull your users. You can, get feedback from the community. You don't have to hide behind all of your, corporate policies and stuff. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a breath of fresh air. Transparency is huge. So, yeah, huge fan.
Totally. Good stuff. Well, Winston, where's the main place that people can find you?
Well, if you enjoyed this conversation, you'll enjoy more conversations that I've been having at the Marshall Matters podcast, which is available in all usual podcast outlets and YouTube. You get it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Audio Boom, all the usual, and lots of stuff to dig into there, which I hope you enjoy. I explore taboo topics in the creative industry and beyond. I'm on Twitter at Mr. Win Marshall, and I'm on Instagram, Winston Marshall. And it's been a pleasure.
One quick question before. So the podcast Marshall Matters, was that a play on Eminem? Are you a fan of Eminem?
I'm a big Eminem fan. Although I was a huge, the first two records I absolutely loved, and I must have been like sort of, I don't know, 12, 13 or something like that. Those two first records. So to be honest, I didn't follow him that much after that, but those two records I absolutely loved.
I thought so. I just wanted to make sure.
Does anyone not like him?
The funny thing is, I mean, like, if you remember, like, Eminem was kind of like the first Twitter. Like, I don't know if you, like, I'm sure you remember how divisive he was back in the 90s. He was constantly making headlines. So it was funny, like, kind of following that. It's just,
Oh yeah, he was controversial, that's for sure.
He was, yeah. But Winston, thanks for
I would love to see a future collab between Winston and Eminem. Let's make it happen. All right, guys.
Fun time for him. Let's see if I can fit him in.
Yeah, I mean, Winston, thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Bye.
Gents,